learn something. So I wanted to come by and hear her speak, and actually to thank her for her work last week in heightening the awareness of what Senate Republicans were trying to do in one of the most difficult budget debates in the time that I've been in the state Senate. She got the message out, she got it out in a concise, straightforward, easy to understand way, and I really think it helped us to make our case. But the main thing that I'm impressed by walking into this room tonight is how many of you are here. It is heartening to see this kind of attention, this kind of energy, because if there's one thing that is making a difference on Beacon Hill, and I say it every single day, is that people now are paying attention. You're paying attention, you're here tonight, you're thinking about state government, you're thinking about issues that affect you, and you are making a difference in the political process. And that's why I'm so happy to be here and to offer you a couple of thoughts. Last week was, in fact, the most difficult budget debate that I've ever been in. We are facing the most difficult recession, perhaps since the time of the Great Depression. Now, you will hear many folks say that this is not of our own making, and that is largely true. This is a global recession. There are a lot of factors acting upon us, but I would make the argument, and many of my colleagues would make the argument, that the way that we deal with the recession and the things that we've done going into it do make a difference. We have been engaged in unsustainable practices now for a number of years. The reforms that you see being discussed in the newspaper and on television, you hear about it on the radio, are decades in some cases overdue. And the fact that we didn't undertake them years and years and years ago are making the current situation worse. And so I would argue that even though that recession would have occurred anyway, the fact that we were not poised well to deal with difficult economic times has not helped us in the situation. And I would equally argue that the decisions we make now in the recession are going to set the tone for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for years to come. And so it's all on the line. It is true. We have a very difficult situation. But there are different ways to deal with it and choices that have to be made. And those choices will have serious consequences for us and our children and maybe even their children. And that's why last week when the Senate Republicans went into debate, we tried to offer that different view of looking at the world. Many folks will tell you that there is no way to deal with the current problem except for raising taxes and generating revenue. Well, you know what? I was in the Massachusetts House back in 1991. And in 1991, we had a budget deficit of somewhere around $2 billion. And if you read a lot of what was being said, it was suggested that there was no way out of this. We've got to raise taxes. There's no alternative. It's going to hurt, but we have to do it. Well, in 1991, we had a governor named Bill Weld and a lieutenant governor named Paul Cellucci. And I like to think they knew a little bit about economics, because together we got together and we reduced taxes over 40 times. And that $2 billion budget deficit became a $2 billion budget surplus. Raising taxes in a broad-based way is not the only way to deal with an economic crisis. And so what we're trying to talk about a lot on Beacon Hill as Senate Republicans is remember the fundamental fact that increasing rates on a decreasing base of economic activity doesn't help you solve the problem. So we tried to offer a couple of different ideas. One of them is this, and you didn't get to read enough about it, and to be honest, I'm a little bit frustrated. If you look at the sales tax increase that was approved, it generates, allegedly, about $633 million. How many people in this room know that Senate Republicans offered reforms that would have saved over $1 billion and made those resources available for other things like public safety and education? We put every one of those on the table, and as Barbara mentioned, we got votes on the vast majority of them because we wanted to show that there's a different way to approach this situation. One of the other things we're trying to look at is small businesses. Small businesses, depending on whose numbers you look at, are projected to create 60 to 80% of the jobs that we need to get us out of the recession. And yet when we look at how we're dealing with the recession, you'll see that there are special programs for large employers, the ones in the life sciences, the ones that are making movies in Massachusetts. There are a whole host of boutique kinds of things for larger employers. But when you look at what we're doing for small employers, you see very, Very little. In fact, at a Ways and Means hearing a few months ago, I asked our Secretary of Economic Development, what do we do for small businesses? And he said, we provide technical assistance. And I said, well, that's important. But what are we going to do to give them the cash flow and the monetary incentives to be able to create jobs? So one of the amendments that I offered to the Senate budget was actually, by today's standards, a radical idea. And what it said was this: if you're a small business of less than 50 people, and you increase your job force by 10%, so that's about 5 jobs, we're going to give you back, over 3 years, half of the income tax that those new employees are going to pay. Now think about that. We don't have that income tax now, so it would be found money for the state. To a small business that has less than 50 employees, that money means a lot to create a job. And as we move forward, it would create a sustainable future, because in 3 years, the rebate program is over, but we would hope that the jobs would remain. We roll called that vote. We didn't get many votes. But that's the difference. That's why your paying attention makes so much difference to me and my colleagues in the Senate, because there is another way. Let me offer you another example. One of the great things that we tried to talk about, and great in terms of its magnitude, was the fact that you cannot address